Abram took her to be his wife, which essentially just means that he took her in the tent and then some funky music played. Hey everybody, welcome back to Eating the Apple. My name's Jeff.
I'm Chris.
And today we're going to continue discussing Genesis, starting with chapter 12, going through chapter 23. And at the end of the last episode, we saw how the lineage went from Shem to Abram, and we're going to pick up with Abram, his call to righteousness, to walk with God, and his eventual how he eventually becomes the patriarch Abraham. So, yeah, what do we have? What do we have to talk about there, Chris? Starting with Abram in Egypt.
Okay, so one thing that stood out to me is in verse 5 of chapter 12, it seems to be the first mention and kind of obscuration of slavery. You know, I don't know enough about how slavery actually worked back then, or the translations that we have, or the languages and how, you know, people were treated. It's cultural difference and all that. So I don't know how significant it is, and I might have missed some others, but this seems to be the first mention of it. They call them servants or people they acquired, which definitely sounds like slavery to me. But I just thought that was interesting that it was the first that I caught, you know.
Yeah, no, that's, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's going to be a lot of kind of, I don't know, prevaricating about slavery. Not once does it ever explicitly call it out for being a necessary evil. You know what I mean? It's just, look, this is the way it is.
Yeah, it's just what it is.
And not only is there slavery, but there's an expectation placed on slaves that, there's no room for error. It's like, you are a slave, therefore these things happen. You are a concubine. Mm-hmm. You're a hand servant or a maid servant, whatever. That means that you have to do what I say. And even if that means that I'm going to make you sleep with my husband because whatever, you have to do it,
Yeah. But also, I mean, if you kind of think about it, what was the alternative? These were nomadic people. So it's not like you could just go out in the wilderness by yourself and survive. It might have even been considered getting a 9-to-5 job, you hope that your kids get a good master. You know?
No doubt. Could very well be.
I mean, like I said, it was a completely different cultural thing. That's not a justification of it. I'm not saying it was a good thing. But that, it seems to be the way it was.
So with very little foreknowledge or description of who Abram is and why he deserves such a blessing, God basically comes to him and said, "You will go forth. You will be a great nation. I'll make your name great." So let me read this. "I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you." It's interesting. One of the things I've come across in my reading and in the commentary that I've read is how there's there's a common way that they rhetorically will continue, or I'm sorry, what's the word? Repeat certain phrases, blessings and blessing, great, nation, whatever the word is. The whole idea is that it kind of creates a pattern that you're supposed to read with. And let's see.
When you talked about this with me earlier, I thought you were talking about, because I've brought up in my notes that I made lots of times where the stories repeat. I thought that's what you were talking about, where it says one thing here and a couple of chapters, a couple of verses, whatever, later it says it again. Are you talking about specifically in, following blessing with blessing, 2 sentences later, whatever that?
Yeah, okay. That's the idea. So in this very passage, so he talks about making the first 2 lines. "I'm going to make you into a great nation." The last 2 lines, all the people on earth will be blessed through you. So we're talking about a group of people and a group of people. In the middle 2, we're talking about your name being great. You will be a blessing. So an individual, and then the individuals who curse you, I will curse them. So we go from being a nation, a group, an individual, and a group. There's a term called a chiasm or a chiasmus, where the ancient authors of these texts would write in such a way that kind of like draws your attention to the center of something. You'll see, oh, this thing is being mentioned here in this passage, and here further down. Let's work our way back and realize that there's a pattern that evolves, that kind of like evolves to the center and then de-evolves basically back to the beginning. It's a rhetorical way that they wrote in order to create in the reader a sense of like problem solving or puzzle, basically a puzzle for you to solve. And I thought that was interesting ever since they pointed that out. And now that you can kind of see those things happening, especially when, as you read, there's a lot of this was passed down originally as an oral tradition before it was put to paper, right? So if you can imagine yourself or even actually read these words out loud, you'll start to find yourself forming these words. You'll hear yourself saying them over and over, and you're like, why am I talking like this? You know? And it's, if you can then put yourself in their shoes, it kind of helps to bring you back to that place to where the stories were originally spread, and help you understand kind of what they were getting at, like why there's such repetition. You're like, oh, I've heard you say 7 a lot. I've heard you say blessed and things like that. And I find that just so interesting all throughout this first book, how often that happens. And if there's something there, if you do want to kind of piece it together and kind of look at these passages that do that, there's something there to kind of chew on.
So the people who were writing this originally, that was part of their culture. So they had to have had a different way of thinking about it. You know, just naturally the concepts comported with their style of thinking easier. How do you think that, like, was that the original intent, was for other people to have this? Or is it something that we're reading into it now because we don't think the same way that they do about language in the same way?
Oh, I think it was there. It's been there for at least some time. I honestly couldn't tell you like what the first example of these things are, but I think it's something that we have. It's not there for us. It can be, and we use it. We notice it and find that it's interesting. But what I think it does, it serves more to bring us back to that time and place. Because if it's just you and I in the year 2024, we can sit here and scoff at all this text and say, there's no, like, this is such ridiculous stuff. But if you kind of utilize some of those tools that were placed there, it helps to make those things more current. It helps to kind of put you in that context, right? And like I said, to me, I find that kind of thrilling, especially whenever you uncover something. It's almost like, oh, did I find something? Like, is this what they were hinting at? I've always heard that the Bible is so beautifully written. That's why it survived. So that's one of the reasons why it survived so long, is because it's so beautiful. And then you read it and you're like, these are just so basic story, and the way the language is so basic. Anyone can understand this, and they're saying, well, yeah, that's the magic. But if you really study it, that's when things start to flourish, you know? And I can kind of see that. I kind of see what people are hinting at when they say that, you know?
That's interesting. I'll keep that in mind as I'm reading in the future.
And I didn't make any notes. I didn't make any like specific things, but like when I read this one, that just pops out to me. It could be like you were saying, a lot of these. So like this text has been interpreted and translated numerous times throughout the millennia, but always with these things in mind. Like, you don't want to lose sort of like the essential. You don't want to lose the text, but you also don't want to lose like the mindset that the original author might have had. And so you have to find a way to turn it from an oral tradition to a written one. And the way to do that might be through kind of like massaging the text to make it sound, the words themselves, to make it sound more like chiasmic. I hope.
Oh yeah. Like when a song goes into a chorus early, you know, it jars you a little bit. That might be the same kind of thing. These people might have thought about these things, and if the resolution didn't come the way it was intended, that might have had some meaning.
Yeah, that's very true.
That's interesting.
So Abraham, I mentioned Abram going to Egypt, but that still hasn't happened. Before that, he gets blessed. He doesn't realize yet that he didn't realize until, like, he realized before Egypt that he was going to be blessed, that these things were going to come to him, right? So, but then he does go to Egypt. He goes to Egypt because in the land of Canaan, there's a famine.
Famine, yeah.
Yeah. So he and Sarai devise a plan. Do you have anything on that?
Yeah, I do. So I'm just gonna read, because I feel my hackles coming up. I'm just gonna read what I wrote.
This is why people pay. This is why people pay for this.
Yeah, because they totally pay for this. It says there was a famine in the land. And just as he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife, I know what a beautiful woman you are. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. They will kill me and take you. But if you say you're my sister, then I'll be treated well because, we're related. And then they'll spare my life because of you. So I'm just going to read it. This is just absurd. Not that it couldn't have happened, but if Abram could talk with God regularly, which I think is documented, maybe not up to this point, but definitely documented later, he can pretty much talk to God whenever he wants. Couldn't he have asked God to protect him without his wife needing to be married to the Pharaoh? Doesn't it go against God's idea of marriage? If God is allowing this to happen so that it'll protect him, then I don't know. It seems so absurd to me.
Yeah, no doubt. This is not the first time that Abram. We've already discussed how Noah is considered a righteous man.
Mm-hmm.
Abram receives this blessing because he is righteous, and yet he has to lie. He just can't think of any other way. God's already told. He's already going to Egypt because he's been told to not have any fear, to not worry about it. God's got his back, and he's like, I don't know to what extent God has my back. Does that just mean that my shoes won't wear a hole in them?
Don't worry about it, but I'm going to worry about it.
Exactly. Yeah. So he's like, I know. He's like, God didn't mention my wife being beautiful, so I guess that's on me. So when we get to Egypt, we're sisters. Stop holding my hand, things like that.
When we get to Egypt, I know they're going to come to you. Yeah. It's okay. I'm going to get rich because of it.
Yeah, exactly.
But then again, back then, women were possessions. So, it's entirely possible the love was not the same as we have love today, because I couldn't do that. There's no way.
Do what?
I couldn't let, even if it meant I was going to die, I couldn't let some dude just have my wife. Maybe I'll get her back.
Yeah. That's insanity for sure. But yeah, I mean, Abram is no one if he isn't, indecisive, impulsive character, pretty much. Like he, so like you said, they go in there, they devise this plan where they're going to lie. And sure enough, just like Abram thought, see, that's the thing. Abram knew. He knew that she was so beautiful that they were going to praise her to the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh said, oh, very well. Right this way, my lady. Mm-hmm. And let's see.
And then, so I'm going to read this from the Bible again. But the Lord inflicted serious diseases on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife. Just stop it from happening.
Uh-huh.
You're El, Yahweh, whatever, God, you're the supreme being. You've got control. You're going to have Abram's back.
Yep.
Why inflict this on Egypt and their leader? There's no point.
Was it performative
I
for
see
Abram?
it as a retribution, but it's retribution for nothing. It could have been avoided.
Yeah, and exactly. So, yeah, for what reason, though? Pharaoh should be very, very confused, shouldn't he? He's like, what is happening?
Pissed.
Yeah, like, what's happened here? Yeah. So, assuming, in the text, we don't know. So, moving on from that last sentence you read, verse 18. So, Pharaoh summoned Abram. What have you done to me? So, he knows.
Yeah.
God told him or something. Yeah, he's like, hey, there's a famine happening. Abram, you already got your riches, but we're going to inflict serious damage upon Pharaoh. And but he knows exactly what happened. What have you done to me?
He knows what happened. What have you done to me? But all of these riches I've given you, just consider them payment for I'm renting your wife. Right. Take it and go.
And it's not the last time that the Pharaoh will have to do that to this lineage, to this family, because that's not the last time that they pull this crap.
No, it's not, and it's not the last time that they like other people pull it as well.
Exactly. Yeah. It's almost baked into their DNA that they have to act this way when it comes to, they have to be duplicitous. Oh, I know that my 75-year-old wife is freaking hot as crap, but gotta keep the ruse up.
Yes. This is my sister.
Yeah, exactly. How come you guys look nothing alike? Literally everyone looks the same because they're all inbred, but me and her, I don't know.
It does say that he is her brother later.
Exactly.
Half different mother. So,
yep. Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's his half sister.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So then Pharaoh casts them out and says, "Be gone. Take your wife. Get the heck out of here. But keep the camels."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take your
So
riches.
yeah, exactly. All right. So chapter 13 takes all the stuff that the Pharaoh gave him and his wife and Lot. And it says Abram became very wealthy in livestock and silver and in silver and gold. Very, very good to have like a nice little bit of capital investment from the Pharaoh to say, here you go, take all this crap and go make it, go be rich.
He should go to another society and pimp out his wife again.
Uh-huh.
Make some more money.
Yeah, he's
Be
got a
the
little
first, be the first Elon Musk.
oh boy. Yeah, so he goes back to where that's another thing on his trek down from Canaan, or from where did he come from? He came from Canaan, I think, right? And so he went down to Israel, Egypt, building altars to God along the way. As he was blessed, he was building off altars. So he goes back to one of the previous altars that he went to, and they started flourishing. His family and he just at a certain point it was untenable. They had to say, "All right, Lot, I've been blessed. I'm going to give you first choice of which land to take," right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so Lot said, well, Lot looked around and looked toward Zoar, right?
I did want to make a note of this, though, that not only were their holdings so big that the land could not support both of them in the same place, but the Bible says that the Canaanites and the Perizzites were also living there at the time. So, I don't know, that just seems insane a little bit.
What, there's so many people there?
There's not enough room in this town for the both of us. But on top of that, there's a town around us. Like, yeah, it's, I don't know.
Now, I thought, I'm reading the text. I thought there was like a little bit of duplicity here where Abram gave Lot first choice and he chooses the bountiful looking area of Zoar right off the Jordan River. But somehow Abram knew, he had like some sort of pre-knowledge that Lot was going to choose a worse area. And I'm trying to find that. I forgot where I found that.
Yeah, I don't know specifically. I do remember
that sounds familiar, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I can't remember. Maybe it was previous in one of God's blessings to Abram that, he'll be, it doesn't matter where you choose. Give Lot it. But so that being the case, and I mean, I'm going on this knowledge that I think I have. So I'm not trying to create something new here. But if that's the case, then it's almost as if Abram had the secret that he was keeping from Lot. He's like, go ahead and choose whichever one. Oh, you want that fresh, beautiful land over there? Well, sure, whatever, dude. Like, I already know that that wherever you choose, the other place is going to be just fine. So I don't know. It's a little bit of dishonesty from Abram, which is weird. He's always been such an upright standing.
There's a lot. So much dishonesty from supposedly righteous people.
Yep.
Chosen people.
Let's see. So then Abram went to live near the great trees of Mamre and built an altar to the Lord. So yeah, I mean, if that's all it takes, honestly, if I could get all these blessings and all I had to do was build an altar, which I'm assuming then was probably what, small towers, wells, like what does an altar consist of? Do you know?
So the Anatomy of God book that I was reading had a thing about that. Exodus book did as well, but it was later stuff. The original ones, I believe, were essentially like later on when God gives instructions on how to build the temple. He talks about a place to rest his feet. Essentially, that's what the Ark of the Covenant was to be when placed in the temple, and it was essentially like that, from what I understand, just kind of a flat mound of stones, had a flat top so that you could put offerings to burn up there. Essentially, is just what it was.
Okay. Well, and whenever I also like the imagery that they conjure here when they say that Lot is going to live among the cities of the plain. There's been a lot of narrative built around that, like what that represents. Do you have any thoughts on that? Like our modern interpretation kind of recognizes that as like kind of like a dense city, the degradation and kind of like slumminess that comes with that, and he chooses to go live where land has already been established, whereas Abram is content with creating anew on his land.
I don't think that's Abram's intention, though. I think they were a wandering people, and I don't know if that was cultural for them or if it was their place in society. They wander and tend the sheep and then sell their wares in the cities or whatever. But
Mm.
I don't think that he was intending to create. He was just happy to live there and
Mm.
continue doing his thing. He knew God was going to bless him,
Mm.
so it didn't really matter where he went, I don't think.
Gotcha.
But Lot going, you see later, Lot goes in, he's living in a city. You
Mm-hmm.
know, at some point he was also a shepherd, but he gave it up and went and lived in the city. And
Precisely.
yeah, Abram, you know, amongst his people, you know, according to the Bible here, his people essentially is just him and his offspring to come. But obviously he's not, you know, a nation unto himself. There are tons of people, there are cities, there are tons of people out here, and his group of people have this way of life, and it doesn't need a city. It might
Right.
be antithetical to cities, kind of
Okay.
thing. So I think that's the significance, is just that, you know, the plains is where he wants to be, among the cities,
Mm-hmm.
not in the cities.
Gotcha. Okay. Very interesting. Um, okay. Let's see. And yeah, so that pretty much wraps up 13. And so when we go into 14, that's when the kings capture Lot, right? There's a big bunch of like when Kedor Laomer, man, old Kedor Laomer, that guy, he really gets after it. And let's see, the title king of Goyim, that guy too, man, oh man, I think that's the same guy actually. I have no idea. Bera, Birsha, oh my God, careful, Shinab's coming. So we have all these kings. They form coalition and they go and capture Lot. And
well, they don't go to capture Lot, though. They're warring amongst themselves, and Lot is living in one of their cities.
Right.
He's living in the city of one of the defeated kings.
Right.
So he's taken up as a slave with everybody else that got captured.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so Abram hears of this, right? And he wants to jump to his nephew's defense, right?
Yeah.
Let's see.
So he takes what? Well, first let me say this, because he finds out about it because the text says a man who had escaped came and reported this to Abram the Hebrew. And I find that very telling. I don't know what it's telling of, but Hebrew originally meant wanderer, and now it means, you know, descendants of these people that we're talking about. But then it meant wanderer, and I don't think he was the only one. That's what I'm saying. It goes back to this whole society of people like him. He's not a nation unto himself yet. You know, he's one of these people who are already called Hebrews. I think that's fascinating. And it seems like it's telling me something, but I'm not sure what yet.
Yeah, well, they've already been recognized as people who have God on their side, right? Like, then the Pharaoh recognized the Pharaoh was spoken to by God, right? And that's how he knew to get rid of Sarai and say, right. You know, like,
but according to what we have here, though, it's just him that's with God. The rest of his people might be worshiping other gods. I saw something that said the wandering peoples of the Levant chose Yahweh as their god. He's a storm god, and it was kind of a warlike thing, because they had clashes with Egypt a lot. And so these warlike people, the storm god rolling in the thunder, and, you know, they want to seem scary and stuff. So it's entirely possible. I'm probably entirely wrong, but I think it is entirely possible that these other people may have been worshiping Yahweh, and Abram had El, and that's what made him stand alone. And then later, you know, they meshed up.
Right on. Very cool. Yeah, that could very well be. I like that a lot. So, Abram assembles a ragtag group of his slaves.
318 men.
What does that mean?
I don't think it means. I don't think he necessarily took slaves. I'm sure he did, but it didn't necessarily have to be all slaves.
Yeah.
But it just says that 318 men. I don't know what the biblical significance of that number is, but so these groups, I think it was 5 kings to 4 kings. They came through. The 4 kings got defeated, and then the 5 kings took Lot and went off. And he took 318 men, chased them down, defeated this army. Now, granted, they had just been in a battle, but they were victorious, and they were far more numerous than 318 men. And he wipes them out.
Yeah.
Just completely destroys them and takes Lot and brings back all of the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
these are wanderers. These are shepherds. What weapons do they have? Like they must have those cool sticks, those canes, and I don't know what else,
I
Like,
mean,
and so
they have to have knives.
you'd
They
think they'd
might
have
have
some.
swords. These were common enough things back then.
Okay, they all. So you think they have
Probably had
318 swords?
slingshots.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so they had some sort of
Yeah,
tactical gear, some sort of projectiles.
yeah, they probably
Okay.
had some shields, but I mean, it's still against an army. Like, in that totally accurate battle simulator, if you put 318 Marines against 5 armies, I don't know how well that's going to come out. You know what I
Very
mean?
interesting.
And
Yeah.
they don't have ARs.
Yeah, and these were all kings. These were all people who with trained, trained art, like literally armies. You're
Like
right.
with government, yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, was
with
organization.
training and organization and money behind them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. All right, so yeah, he goes and rescues Lot, right?
Mm-hmm. And he meets
And
with the kings that got
uh,
defeated, and
mm-hmm,
they come out and they offer him bread and wine,
uh-huh,
and he makes an offering of that to the Lord.
uh-huh,
And then they say, praise to you and your God. Thank you, blah blah blah. And they offer him a bunch of stuff. And Abram's like, apparently he takes some and gives it a tenth to God.
uh-huh.
And then he's like, I don't want anything. I'm not taking anything. I want, whatever my men ate and their share of the spoils they can have, but I don't want anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah, I mean he
he's
is
a noble
an
badass.
honorable, yeah, a noble, yeah. He's essentially he's on the level of those kings. He has his own
Yeah.
army that even at 1/10 of their numbers, if we're being generous, can defeat
Yeah.
them all.
I mean,
Um,
with God behind him, I can get, the idea that 318 men can take down an army, but it seems absurd, especially with the specificity of the number. You could have just
mhm.
said he grabbed some men and went. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so you actually bring up an interesting point in the notes. Who got the tithe? Was it sacrificed to God or was it given to the kings? And if so, for what? Just so that
yeah.
Abram could.
Specifically, what stood out to me was that was the tenth of what he gave, as a tithe, was that of the bread and wine, because
Mhm.
that I could see being offered as a sacrifice and burn up or whatever. But the spoils of war, the swords and the shields and the food. Well, I mean that food could work, but the gold and jewelry and all this other stuff. How was that offered to God as a sacrifice? Did you just leave it there and let somebody else come get it later? Or
Bury it,
I
destroy
don't
it,
know.
something. I mean, like that's the whole. That's the idea of a sacrifice to God is wasting something, spoiling something. Like no
Yeah,
one can have this, no one can profit or redeem this or what have you.
I think at some point later when we get into the law, it talks about how the priests of the temple are allowed to eat the sacrifice,
Wow.
or maybe extra was paid so that they could. I don't remember exactly. We'll have to get into that
Yeah.
when the time comes, but I'll try to remember that.
Well, now I mean that pretty much closes chapter 14, and the beginning of chapter 15 is after Abram has done all of these kingly things, rescued his nephew with a small army, proven to those kings that he is a righteous man by not taking any of the spoils and also donating a share of them, basically forcing them to donate a share of them.
Yeah.
God comes to Abram and says that he will be his shield, like he will protect him. And he says, "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield."
Don't
It's
be
like,
afraid. This guy I've talked to before, you
yep,
know me,
yep.
Jeff. Don't be afraid. I'm just here to do a podcast.
Oh, it's the same guy that I've been talking to for an hour and a half. Okay, it's just him. Okay,
for
yeah, and like
free.
also,
So,
he says, "I will." He basically says, "I will protect you," and Abram's like, you can. I also just defeated 5 armies, so like, but yeah, that's great, dude. Thanks, I appreciate it."
well, I
Um,
mean, spoiler alert, but Jacob kicks God's ass, and in an upcoming story here. So
he really does. He really does. Okay, so so Abram's he's about to receive a bounty that he is great, even
yeah,
when compared to what he's already received.
God says He's going to give him a very great reward, and Abram
Mm-hmm,
is like, "I'm gonna argue with you, God. God,
mm-hmm,
what can you give me? I'm
mm-hmm.
childless. If you give me something, great. I'm gonna have to worry about coming up with money to buy food, but who do I have to pass it on to? It says, is it, who's going to inherit my estate? Elier of Damascus? or you haven't given me no children to serve in my household. So is it going to be Eliezer, however you pronounce it, of
Eliezer is how I've been
Damascus,
reading it. Yeah.
or is a servant, a slave, different? Like, because
Mm-hmm.
the wording of it sounds to me like, because it's his name is of Damascus, it seems like it's someone who's brought in from the outside. He's
Mm-hmm.
of these people.
Mm-hmm.
If he was born into Abram's house as a slave, would he still maintain that moniker?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. I think they usually take the demonym of their parents, right? They'll take the blank of Bilhah or whatever, right? But I don't know.
But you would think that would change.
Yeah, yeah, I
But
don't
I
know.
mean, you could still take it from your parents and then change it when you move or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, it doesn't matter because God says He's going to give Abram a son. It specifically says, "Then the word of the Lord came to him."
Uh-huh.
So, again, spoiler alert. We're going to the New Testament here. It opens with a great. I don't know what the phrase is off the top of my head, but it's almost a mirroring of Genesis 1:1. He says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God," or whatever the wording is. Um, the Word is referring to Jesus in that sense. It's very explicit. Does that mean here that the word of the Lord came? Did Jesus come to him? Was Jesus a thing? Not necessarily. I know Jesus wasn't a thing in the minds of the people who were writing this, but was it changed afterwards? Was it a retcon of what was already there to apply to Jesus? I don't know. Do people believe that Jesus was the one that came to him? Was it the voice of God talking to
Right.
him instead of a physical apparition?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I don't know.
Like I've been listening to the Hebraic scholars in their rabbinical interpretation, and there's hardly any messianic interpretations that I've come across yet. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
usually they might say like Christians believe this, or Christians have applied that to mean this other thing. Like when we get to Judah later, writing in on a what does he write in on, a donkey and a goat or something?
Yeah,
It's like, well, that's
basically.
Jesus. Like, he like Judah is the patriarchal precursor to Jesus or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and so like they have to like imbue everything he does with like things that Jesus is professed to have done. So um, okay, so yeah, we're doing great. His offspring will not just be numerous, but count the stars. Can you count that high? He says. Can you even count that high? There's a lot. There's like 10. So you're
There
gonna have
are
all these
way
kids.
more stars than there are people on Earth, and we're not all descendants of this guy. So, are we waiting for that to be fulfilled still, or
And even
you
then,
know?
it's not just the people; it's the Hebrews.
Yeah.
Like
Well, yeah, that's what I'm getting at. Like,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
obviously, people will say this is, it's metaphor.
uh huh,
But if we're, again, I keep coming back to taking this literally because so many times I've been told it's literal. You know, talk to Ken Ham or any of these other people, and it's all very literal. It happened exactly the way it's in whichever version they like. You
yeah.
know,
Those people should not be taken seriously. I don't know. I don't know, man. Like,
yeah,
what are you supposed to do? Like, seriously, read any other book, and you'll see that this is silly. Yeah. So he basically lets him know that he's going to be given uh, a son, right? An heir.
mm-hmm.
Um, let's see. What does he do? Abram brings all these things to God, brings all these sacrificial animals to God, and let's see what happens then. I've forgotten.
Well, there is a more direct, an actual direct reference to the Exodus,
Mm.
and obviously, I don't believe prophecy exists, so this had to be inserted afterwards. It says, I just had it. Verse 13. Then
Yeah,
the Lord said to him,
yeah.
know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated there. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and after they will come out with great possessions. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess the whole point is to make them rich eventually. Like,
Mm-hmm.
these are the chosen people. Why are you going to not only allow but prescribe them to be enslaved and mistreated?
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
don't know
that's
that.
interesting. that's quite interesting. I don't know. I wonder again. I mean, we're retconning, right?
Yeah, has to
Yeah,
be.
yeah. That has to be it. Yep. So he had this terrible nightmare and receives this bad news from God.
It says in verse 16, in the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here. Is it counting a generation as 100 years, or is this something different? And then also, it says, for the sin of the Amorites has not reached its full measure. What is that sin? I've looked it up, and it just says something about them being wicked, and it's not their time yet. But that's, again, reading a little too much into it. You're trying to make sense of it, but you're adding stuff. So
Yeah.
I don't know specifically why it's important, because I don't think it's ever mentioned again.
Huh.
Not positive, but I don't think it's ever mentioned again, at least in the canonical books that we have.
Right. I have no idea. Yeah. I don't know. Does God have a history of making these assertions and then them not coming to fruition? I wonder.
I've seen a few, but that one's the one that stands out the most to me, just because it makes the least sense.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah. There is some reading about the Amorites here. I'll have to do a little bit more digging on that. Let's make a note to come back to the Amorites because I mean God is the one saying this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'll be a episode 12 type of thing. Yeah. So yeah, God, Abram receives his big visit in the promise from God, saying,
Yep.
you will have a nation born unto you, but it won't all be milk and honey, right? There'll be some
Right.
things that some negative things happening.
Yeah, and then God appears to him as a smoking fire pot. We mentioned the fire pot earlier when I was talking about the Noah's Ark, and so maybe I'm getting the two verses conflated or whatever, but this magic smoking fire pot with a blazing torch inside it, or maybe it doesn't say specifically inside it, but a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces of the sacrifice. Specifically, it says too, I thought it was interesting because they cover so much exactly how you're supposed to deal with sacrifices later on. But for now, it says that I believe it says that he took a sacrifice and he cut them in half.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He cut them in half, the heifer, goat, and a ram. But he didn't cut the birds in half. Mm-hmm. So the God was going between the pieces that were laying on the altar. I guess this had to be a big altar for all of that to fit, and God to go between the pieces. I guess he didn't burn it at that point.
Yeah,
because he had to defend the sacrifice from birds of prey. So
right. Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. Also, this covenant that God's establishing with Abram involves cutting something. You know what I mean? When we know a little portention is that his second covenant with Abraham, his covenant with Abraham will involve cutting something as well.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of cuteness there. It's so cute how that ends up happening. But yeah, I really don't know. I'm not sure what meaning there might be.
I'll talk about it when we get there, but I think there's a good reason for it.
Oh,
there's a very good reason for circumcision specifically.
All right, great. Yeah. I mean, we're almost there. Let's go ahead and yeah. So, but first we have to get to how God is even going to fulfill his end of this bargain, right? He didn't ask much from Abram except for some animals, but now what's God going to do? He has to keep up his end of the bargain, right?
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead.
Well, I was just going to get it started.
Yeah, go for it.
Now, Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, the Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her. And that's not me interjecting slave in this instance. It specifically says slave in the New International Version. I'm pretty sure it says it in the King James as well, but definitely, to slave and I'm going to go sleep with her. And this is ordained by God because they have children. Well, maybe that's reading too much into it, but it succeeds and he has a child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's something that even Sarai is comfortable with. I mean, at least as far as we can tell, she's like, all right, certainly I can't be having any kids. So it'll have to be Hagar, and she's my slave. She has to do what I say. And yeah, Abram took her to be his wife, which essentially just means that he took her in the tent and then some funky music played. And sure enough, just like with most of these stories, they had sex and she conceived, like just the most back to back, like these things happen. You know what I mean? Like it's, I wonder if that's just to short circuit all the things that happened in between, or if that's to say that like, if you're doing this correctly, you will have sex and you will be pregnant, like there's no time elapses. It's like, there it is. I wonder, because like some of the more fundamentalist views of this text nowadays, these people politically want to make it such that conception is when life begins. You know what I mean? And I wonder if there's any sort of like insinuation of this text into that worldview.
Yeah, I don't know. At best, if that's the case, it's incredibly hypocritical, because they then also turn around and say that marriage is one man and one woman, when clearly it's one man, one woman, and her slave.
Yeah,
at
exactly.
This point.
Or any slave. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
As far as we know so far, it's just one man, one woman, and whatever people are enslaved to them.
Yeah.
And
here's another thing I think is telling. Hagar once she knows that she's pregnant, she starts to, it says, despise her mistress.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I'm going to have his kid. And so now, how is she over me and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so Sarah starts complaining to her husband about it. And he says, hey, it's your slave. You do whatever you want. And so she starts.
It's your property.
Yeah, exactly.
Just avoid the stomach area, because I got this deal with the big guy, and I don't want you to get in the crossfire of that bad boy.
Yeah, and so she runs off. Obviously, she's being mistreated. She's pregnant. What's she going to do? She runs off.
Well, it takes balls for a slave to just run away.
That's true. Maybe they were living in an area close to where she originally came from or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But an angel of the Lord found her and said, no, go back and submit to your mistress. If she wants to mistreat you, that's fine. But God's going to have your back because of your kid.
It's like those northern anti-abolitionists in the Civil War. They're like, hey, boy, what do you think you're doing here? Get your tail back down to the South.
Yeah.
It's like, I thought I was doing the thing I was supposed to do. I'm trying to escape the worst treatment imaginable. Like, yeah, that's what God said to Hagar.
And also, here's one of the things, though, that talking about giving God names, the names of God having power, and the reason they don't, people don't say Yahweh and stuff like that in certain traditions. But one of the things, about talking about the names of God having power and stuff, in this instance, Hagar gives God a name. She's talking to an angel, but somehow she gives God a name. But she calls God the one who sees me. And this is one of those things, I think, that in the tradition, and this might have come from my esoteric studies, way back in the day and stuff, but names of God having power, and this is personal and private for her, so it may not have given her power like, fire. But, it gave her importance and self-worth and stuff. And she had this personal name for God because she had known God, but it was an angel also. And then also I want to mention the Catholic version. I haven't been talking about it a whole lot because it mostly comports, but she was surprised to be alive, according to the commentary for it, because she had talked to God. I don't know when this idea of, if you hear the voice of God, you'll die. That's why the angels talk to you instead or whatever. But like, because people have talked to God before, people have been in his presence and conversed with him, and and not just Adam and Eve, like before all this stuff started. So why now? Why is she scared? I don't know. Surprised to be alive just because she was talking to God. I don't know.
Maybe they're trying to give us some feeling that she knows that she's wronged in some way. Maybe that's the way they can narratively help her understand that she's part of a plan. Before this, she was just a useful idiot. She was just a proxy for Sarai, right? She's away for Abram's. Once she has no idea what's happening, she runs away. She's like, why am I being treated this way? I didn't want to have sex with that guy. I certainly don't want to be mistreated because of something I had nothing to do with. And God's like, it's fine. Like, here's what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
You're part of this massive plan. In fact, you don't even have to name that dude. I've got a name for you. His name is Ishmael, and he will be plentiful, as many as the stars as in the sky, yada yada.
Mm-hmm.
And but he's going to be a donkey. He's going to be a real jerk, and his brothers
Mm-hmm.
are going to be hostile towards him, and all of these things. And in spite of, and because of that, because finally her eyes were open to this fact, she finally feels seen by God. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't imagine that her entire life was spent wondering what the heck was going on. Like, why is this my life? Why am I being bought and sold? This rich guy, this leader of a caravan gets to have sex with me because I'm his wife's servant. Like, yeah, I can imagine finally being seen by God and being bestowed these blessings. It's probably a reason to dig a well. I have to
Mm-hmm.
imagine. Yeah. Any other notes before we move on to Ishmael actually being born and moving on to the next chapter?
No.
Okay. Yeah. So it says here that Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael, and we know that he's going to be 100 whenever Isaac is born. So
Mm-hmm.
Ishmael will be 14 years old whenever Isaac finally comes around. I'm not sure if that's mentioned in the Bible. Probably not even pertinent information. Just something to consider. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, well, I'm going to get later on in another episode, I think, we're going to cover an issue where, like, the math literally doesn't add up in the Bible.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it is. So I guess in that for that reason, it is kind of fun to kind of keep up with it, just to check their math.
yeah. So
Uh,
we're on to circumcision, and
mm-hmm.
it's the covenant that God makes with Abraham. And it's almost funny. He's got to cut off part of his dick, and then he's gonna have sex with Sarah and have a baby. But uh, the circumcision thing, changing the name and all that. I think the reason circumcision is important here.
Mm-hmm.
Can you choose a part of your body to sacrifice to God? You're gonna cut it off. What's the least important part? You know what I mean? I think
Mm-hmm.
that's why circumcision is what it is, because you can totally lose that bit of skin.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you kind of need to, the muscle that holds it closed can be too tight. It can cause painful urination, all kinds of stuff. So,
Uh-huh.
uh, but just purely practical, you could say I'll cut off my little toe, but you got to walk in the meantime until it heals. You don't have to screw.
Yeah.
That is definitely a part of your body you can lose without a whole lot of inconvenience.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. I wonder what else. So, is that particular part of the body made important in the covenant? Your descendants will fall. Your descendants after you for generations to come. This is my covenant with you and the descendants after you. The covenant you are to keep. Every male among you shall be circumcised. Let's see. You have to do it at 8 days old, which is kind of interesting. It's not 7; it's 8. I wonder if there's anything to be made. If there's any points to be made from that.
I don't
The fact that it's
know.
8
One
days.
thing in that Exodus book, he did mention because the idea is that the Levites, who are the ones who did escape Egypt, became the priests. That all of the texts that are priestly, are the ones with the laws, and this kind of, the 8 days. Does the 8 days in here? Yeah, I believe it's in here.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a later insertion by
Hmm.
those priestly types, or
Hmm.
is this an actual, like, a rare instance of a prescriptive law kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
uh, for them?
And I wonder, like, is this a sort of a way that I wonder if just over the centuries the rabbis had noticed that, man, if we circumcise these kids before 8 days, we're losing a lot of them. They bleed to death, they get infections, but
Possibly.
8 days, I don't know. I wonder if there was any like painful trial and error that occurred before they just realized that, hey, we can just kind of take a little bite of this and
Yeah, I
everyone's
don't
going to
know.
be okay. He basically says any male among your descendants who are not circumcised, who have not cut themselves, will then be cut from the group. They will be ostracized and cut off, right? So
Mm,
they've broken the covenant. That's the big thing. Don't do that. So Abram gets a new name. He's Abraham now.
mm-hmm.
And then Sarah gets to be Sarah, or Sarai gets to be Sarah. I don't know why. Why does she get a new name?
So
Because he gets a new name?
I've heard that the reason is because he's with God now. Like he kind of already was, but now like in the same way that God breathes the breath of life into Adam, he's breathing his life into these people now with the covenant. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's why they're adding the H. The H is from the words, like I wouldn't say it's like a pun, but it's, it's a callback to this breath of life thing is what I'm.
So is it literally supposed to be like the like emission of a breath, like like the
That's what it was talking about Adam, and I think this is not the same, but it references it.
very interesting. That's cool. I like that. I'm gonna
Yeah,
put an H.
it is
I'm gonna put an
interesting.
H at the end, at the back of my name.
Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff. Just like, okay, coffee guy. So, but God, Abraham's incredulous, right? So
Mm-hmm.
Abraham, his name is Abraham now because he's going to bear a son, and Sarah's name is Sarah. Sarai's name is Sarah because she's going to bear him a son. And but Abraham, he's like, what? Right? He doesn't. He's
Yeah,
laughing. He thinks that's
he's like,
hilarious.
he's 100. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm so old,
Mm-hmm.
and I read that, and I'm sitting here going, okay, well, everybody before you lived a long ass time,
Mm-hmm.
and even your father lived 205. Now,
Yep. And he was 70 when he gave birth to Abraham. When Abraham was born.
so the math I don't think 100% checks out fully throughout this narrative, but even just assuming at face value that the way it's presented in the Bible, I think his father Terah was 130 when he had him, when he had
Abraham.
Abram. Yeah, I could be wrong about that, but at any rate, the point is his own father was old enough that 100 shouldn't have been surprising. Like,
Huh.
I'm gonna have a kid at 100. Are you crazy? Well, people lived long.
You just had one at
Long.
86. Yeah,
Yeah.
you were
So I
you were
mean,
already an octogenarian having a child to begin with, and now you're like, now I'm very old. It's
yeah.
like,
This sounds to me like again, some kind of retconning, some editing from in the future, and people are
mhm,
like, well, this is a little bit crazy because we don't live this long. This
mhm,
he had to have been credulous,
mhm.
whatever. So
Yeah, and then God names his offspring as well. He doesn't give Sarah the chance to give it a name, give the child a name. So God says it's going to be, you're going to call him Isaac, and he will be part of the covenantal lineage. He will also be circumcised, so on and so forth, and he'll be blessed through the covenant, right?
yeah, and this is one case again where the younger child is getting the blessing, but I think a case could be made that the first son was technically illegitimate because it was a slave that bore him, but elsewhere in the Bible talks about that child would be considered his.
Mm-hmm.
It's not illegitimate or whatever. But I think that's the justification in this case that can be made for not giving Ishmael the blessing of the covenant kind of
But
thing.
wasn't, yeah, the Lord is kept me from having children. Oh, okay, so it was Sarah's idea. Sarah is the one who decided that he should sleep with um,
Right.
Hagar, not God. Okay, I was gonna say like it's kind of rude. God's like, but that wasn't the case. Okay, yeah, yeah. Okay, so by 1 year from the day from that
So whoa, whoa,
covenant.
whoa, whoa.
Go ahead.
Sorry, just something that occurred to me.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't God tell him he's going to have a son, and then he had Ishmael,
Yeah.
and then 14 more years, and he has the true kid or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
That would very much seem to me. Actually, I think I made a note similar. Yeah, Abram, and when he's laughing about it, he says, "I'm 100. You're going to give me, a child, and my
Mm-hmm.
wife's 90. We're gonna have a child." And he says, "If only Ishmael might live under your blessing."
Mm-hmm.
Like, he clearly loved the kid.
Yeah.
uh and yeah, that goes with the point, I think, really well.
Yeah, yeah, he was fine. He's like, this is fine with me. Like
Yeah.
you told me that I was going to bear a son. Sarah and I both realized that she's barren or whatever. So we did what we thought we had to do. And God's like, no, that's fine. He's like, but you guys just were impatient. Here comes the
Yeah,
real.
and
She's
then that
actually.
also amplifies things coming up,
Mm,
because they send Hagar and Ishmael away.
mm-hmm,
Like, God, he not God, but Abram loved his son enough to say to God, "Why can't my son have this blessing too?"
mm-hmm,
Or I have a son already.
Yeah.
Give him the blessing.
Mm-hmm.
And then just to turn around and be like, okay, go.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And yeah, and so when even with in spite of Abraham's protestations, God's like, yeah, just Sarah's gonna have a kid. Yeah, 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 exactly. So, so righteous. He's trying to do the right thing. He's recognizing. Oh, maybe that's just it. He's recognizing Ishmael as his firstborn, wondering
Mm-hmm.
why he doesn't get the blessing. Because like it's not a blessing. It's the blessing. It's the blessing of the
Right.
firstborn. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so then both Abraham and Ishmael were circumcised on
Mm-hmm.
that same day, the day that. God, can you imagine being 13 years old and getting circumcised? Oh, like you can't control your boners at that age. You're just like,
Yeah.
you gotta tape it back, dude. Sorry, like this is gonna hurt for a while. All right, so moving on to chapter 18. Let's see what happens here.
Indeed.
This is where the Lord,
Oh, yeah.
huh?
It opens. Chapter 18 opens with Abraham and his family sitting there. They're chilling. They're doing their thing. Abram sees three dudes walking down the road, and I guess he recognizes one of them as God. And so he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Hey. Now, it starts out, there's a lot of genuflecting, and it's very reminiscent of kind of the other cultures of the area, even today, the Arabs and stuff like that. And maybe that's stereotype, but it's something I do associate with them. If I find favor in your eyes, I'm your humble servant, all this stuff, the genuflecting and the heaping praise and stuff to be nice to people. It starts with that. And so I don't know, because it's so similar to that kind of thing, if he's actually recognizing this guy as God, or if it just starts out with, hey, these people are coming. This is what I need to do. And then turns out one of them's God. They talk about, you're going to have a kid at 100 years old. It's another separate retelling. This is what I was getting at earlier. Why the separate retelling? Why is it different? I was hoping what you were talking about was going to give me some context as to why it might be that, it happens under different circumstances. And this time Sarah overhears, and she starts laughing. And I guess Abram supernaturally knows that as well. I know you were laughing about it. Yeah, that seemed a little weird to me, but I think we can kind of gloss over it because, again, it's a second retelling.
Yeah. But that's actually typically whenever there's that sort of reinforcement of a theme, it's to help to instill a sense that it's been divinely inspired or whatever.
Right. I can kind of see that when it comes to something like the servant going and getting a wife for Jacob, and he hears the story, what to do.
He retells the entire story.
Goes down and retells it, but then he comes back and he doesn't retell it. But this is different. The circumstances are different, and the way it happens is different. So
that's very interesting. I hadn't noticed that. But you're right when it comes to the genuflecting. Like there's like a culture of like being a very good host.
And there's a lot of it here.
Yeah, absolutely. 3 seahs of flour. I think I read that's something like that could be interpreted as like 400 loaves of bread. It's like an insane amount of bread.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, like 3 seahs is like, imagine like 2 heaping sacks on both shoulders. Like that's a massive amount of bread.
Yeah, it says probably about 36 pounds. Sorry about my dog.
That's okay.
About 36 pounds of flour.
Yeah, that's a ton.
That's insane.
We got three people outside. One of them looks a little divine, so like he probably has a massive appetite.
It looks a little peckish.
Yeah. So, but anyway, yeah. So yeah, you nailed it. Like that's pretty much it. Sarah was incredulous, so they called her out on it. But yeah, there was, when I was first reading this, I read the first half of this that we're going over, basically from last episode to this one, the rest of this episode, I read all of this about a year ago, and that's kind of what got me into it. Okay. So I'm kind of depending on some of the my previous knowledge, and what I read then, I'm reminded was that I forgot the point that I was going to make, but forgive me while I think about it. Oh yeah, whenever she says that she's going to have this pleasure, she's literally talking about like the pleasure of having sex, not the pleasure of giving birth, and she's incredulous, but instead of she always seems so willing to go in on Abraham's schemes. But whenever God himself has like revealed something to her, or something to Abraham and she by proxy. She's like, she's like, I don't know about that. And
That's true.
that's just that struck me as kind of odd that like at what point, when are we going to, if it's, unless it's to like help to serve some other narrative or to help elucidate a point, when is she going to stop being so incredulous? When are these characters going to stop acting in such a way that seems, incongruous to the way they would act if God himself was standing before you? Like, would you or I, like, as modern day atheists, if you say you and I both were sharing an experience of God in front of us, God often appears to just one person through a dream, through a bow. But if we could look at each other with God in front of us and say, we're seeing this, right? And God says something and we're like, I don't know. Like, we would be the crazy ones, And
yeah.
But these people are steeped in this religion. She believes in God. She knows this is real. And yet, God, because of some, like, because she's a little old and because she's never had a baby up until then, she's going to be like, we'll see. I'll believe it when I see it, right, God? And God's like, yes, that's right. Like, so anyway, I just thought I was reminded of that as I was kind of skimming back over this text. I don't know. It's whatever. So anyway, let's get into Sodom and Gomorrah. I think God's got his killing boots on.
Yeah. Well, and also, no, he doesn't. So he's sitting there with Adam, with Abraham, and they're, I think he says they're sitting under a tree or something at one point, but they're eating there at the end of the road or whatever. They're talking about Sodom and Gomorrah, and God says the outcry of the sins of the cities caught his attention. It's not his knowledge. He's heard about it.
Right. So
there's that. He says the outcry is so great and the sin so grievous that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I'll know. So he's got to go investigate. And then he doesn't. He just Abraham, sasses him out of destroying the city for 50 righteous people and then down to 10 people. And then God's just like, all right. And he leaves the 2 people that were with him, go on to do the job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and like another thing, and is this not a guy? Like, where does God live? He lives a long way away. If he's heard about it, Abraham lives among, like, near enough to these people that he knows exactly what he's talking about. He can see the plane, see over the plains to the buildings over there. He knows exactly. He sees the lights are still on when Abraham's going to bed at 8 p.m. There's still lights on, and he can hear the bass thumping. Right? He's like, "Geez, Louise, what's happening over there?" So God's like, "Hey, have you heard about the Sodom and Gomorrah place?" Abraham's like, "Yeah." And so God's like, I'm going to go look. And Abraham knows. He knows. He's like, I know what can keep you from going. He's like, let me just try. You called it sass. That's great. He's like, I'm going to use a little bit of my my juju on you and get you to not juju. Anyway.
Let's cut that.
Anyway, so he gets him to whittle it down. But like you said, God's just like, that's fine. Like, I came. What else did he come there for? Except, did he go there to like whisper unto Abraham, or was his whole mission to be in that area, to be in that region, to go and take a look around Sodom and Gomorrah? And he's like, "Oh, Abraham lives nearby. Let me go take a look. Let me go talk to my servant."
Well, I mean, maybe it could have been that God was going to Sodom and Gomorrah, and he's like, "Hey, Abraham's on the way. I'm going to go remind him that he's going to have a kid, even though he just had a kid 15 years ago."
And we've already discussed this.
Yeah,
we've already had this discussion. Like, he knows he's gonna have another kid. Yeah. And then that's great. He's like, when the Lord finished speaking to Abraham, he left. He's like, I'm out of here. He's like, I don't need to. Angels, you got this, right?
Yeah,
that's wild.
So the angels go. Well, okay, so we don't know that they're angels. It says they're men at one point, and then it also at another point refers to them as angels.
Mm-hmm.
We're not 100% sure according to the text, because the different texts say different things. So we, as in like me and you, I'm including you in this, we don't know necessarily that these were the same people. The King James specifically, I think, says, and now 2 people, the 2 men, whatever, come, or 2 angels, whatever it is. And then Other ones call them men or angels or whatever, but it implies that it was the same two. So I'm just going to go with that. The same two. God's not with him anymore. He decides he's not actually going to go down and check it out. He's going to send them in his stead. The city of the people, all of the men of the city come down to Lot's house where these people are, and they're banging the doors and like, hey, bring these new guys out so that we can have sex with them. And one thing I wanted to point out about that is the footnote in the Catholic version says that homosexuality, which was widespread among the Canaanites, was sternly prohibited by the Mosaic law. There was no Mosaic law at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Moses hadn't been born. They hadn't come out of Egypt. They hadn't laid anything down.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sure, maybe it was widespread among the Canaanites. I'm pretty sure it was widespread just about everywhere. You know, I heard it referred to as you had sex with who was nearby when you wanted to have sex was what it came down to.
Wow.
But I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to say anything else about that, or we.
Well, no, except that I mean they know it's a trap, and Lot knows it, right? Mm-hmm. So he's prepared. He's fully prepared to spare them the dishonor, I guess, of having to find these horrible people, and he offers his daughters to them, right?
Yeah, and he specifies with more specificity that they're virgins than is talked about later on when it comes to Mary. I think I could be wrong, but it goes in like it says, "I have 2 daughters who have never slept with a man."
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah,
let me bring them out to you. You can have your way with them instead of my guests.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and see, like I said, these people are they're excellent hosts. Like, not only do you want to protect your guests, but you will offer your daughters as a in their stead. You know. Yeah. Let's see. What happens then? Let's see.
So, at one point, the men reached out and pulled Lot back into the house. These angels did this and shut the door, and they blinded the men, because all the men of the city were here. The ones that were closest to the door, they blinded them so that they couldn't find the door anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, so they pulled them back in, they shut the door, and they struck them blind. That's hilarious. And then basically, all right, Lot, you've proven your worth. Get everyone that you know out of here. He's like, because, and like they just start cracking their knuckles. They're like, this ain't gonna be pretty, dude. You gotta go. Anyone with the last name Lot needs to GTFO.
Yeah, it specifies too to take anyone else who belongs to you.
Yeah,
but
that too.
He doesn't. I don't know if he doesn't have any slaves or if he just doesn't take them, but he doesn't run off with them.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah, and even then they don't trust what they've been told, so they have to. There's all this. I mean, it's kind of like an ongoing theme where like this is clearly divine. Like what's happening here is not the act of a man; it's the act of God or people acting on behalf of God. So, and yet they still. Again,
there's a little bit of I guess God changed his mind a little bit too, because he, as they're fleeing, the angels tell him to flee to the mountains, and Lot's like, whoa, I can't go all the way to those mountains. What about this town nearby? And the angels are like, okay, we'll spare that town for your sake. You go there, and why not spare my house? I'll just stay here. You know, destruction go on around it, whatever. It just seems a little weird. Again, that city, that little town that they went was slated for destruction because they're wicked.
Yep.
You know, but it's fine.
Yeah, and literally that's the only tool that you have is the thing that blows everything up. Like I have to get like steer clear. All we have are these freaking these sticks of TNT, and everyone's gonna get one. Yeah, there's no way to protect. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that would truly be a miracle. I don't know if we've gotten to miracles yet, except for when God directly intervenes. Yeah. So let's see. I love this. Let's see. Flee there quickly because I cannot do anything until you reach it. That's why the town's called Zoar. Why? Because like I love it. There's all these little bits of
why.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
one of my favorites. I think we'll get to it at some point, but he called this place El Bethel, which means house of the house of God, or
Or
no,
God's.
God of the house of God. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Yep,
That's
that's
why it's
funny.
called that.
Yeah, exactly. So God God rains down fire and brimstone, as they say, and then
Mm-hmm.
he remembered Abraham. The very specific phrase: he remembered Abraham. He remembered Noah. Things like that.
Yep.
Yep. And then Lot was Lot was removed. Well, Lot and his family removed, except for his wife, right?
Yep. She looked back and
Mm-hmm.
turned into a pillar of salt, which supposedly stands to this day, I think.
Hmm.
Does it say that somewhere? That might have been outside knowledge.
Yeah, I don't know. Anytime it's actually rare. So I'm reading the Zondervan study Bible, and every once in a
Mhm.
while, in a footnote, it'll say this stands to this day. But anytime I've read it actually in the text, it's like to what day, because
Yeah,
there's no
because
way to
it doesn't
guarantee it.
know.
Yeah, there's like
Well, yeah.
yeah. So yeah, and then we get an idea of where Lot just freaking has sex with his kids. Like he's
Yeah,
just
like they just destroyed a city for wanting to have sex with. I mean, is this not as bad? Like,
it's
it's his
almost like
daughters, and
yeah,
I mean,
you get like that sort of like that divine crest, that thing that says like anointed by God, and you're like, oh crap, I can do something wild now. Like I want to have sex with my virgin daughters.
well,
Yeah,
but
man.
they tricked him. That's the thing.
Yeah.
They got him drunk, and then one after another, yeah, at 2 different nights, they went in and slept with him
Hmm.
and got pregnant.
Hmm.
The thing is, I've gotten blackout and drunk before many times.
Hmm.
Too many, too many times. I was in the Navy, so it happened a lot. Um,
The
I've
Navy is floating Sodom and Gomorrah.
never been so drunk that I wouldn't realize I was having sex with my kid.
Oh God, I can't even fathom. That's
Yeah.
horrendous. Yeah,
I mean,
God.
again, it's a different culture. You know,
Yeah,
you can marry your niece and things like that, but like I had to have known what was
yeah,
going on.
yeah. And there are so many instances throughout the Bible, throughout the Genesis, even where it's like sleep is this like magic spell that's put over you, or like
Yeah.
you know, or being drunk is like you can do so many things to someone when they're asleep, and it's not until they wake up that they're like, "What in the heck?" Like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just committed a
Well,
grievous sin.
but also both of his daughters saw his softy. So did their future progeny get destroyed as
Oh boy.
well?
Oh yeah, that's true. They should not if they walked in backwards. They had to have walked in backwards first. That's probably
Walked
actually
it
how it.
backwards and
Yeah.
not looked at it.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. I don't even want
Just some
to.
under the clothes stuff.
Okay, moving on. That's enough. All
I'm
right.
sorry. I'm sorry.
It's in the. Hey, it's in the Bible. It's okay. All right. So now we get the second instance of Abraham just not learning his lesson, like moving, like going to Abimelech, going to a king this time instead of a pharaoh, and saying that Sarah is his daughter because of the
Hmm.
same thing as before. Like you're too pretty. You're such a freaking sexy 90-year-old lady that even this king who can have anyone in his harem would love
Hmm.
to make you part of it. You know?
Yeah. One thing I did want to mention because I found it interesting when I learned it. Abimelech is mentioned a couple of times, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Is this the same guy, or did Abimelech 2 or whatever?"
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, that's just like a generic name for a foreign king
Mm-hmm.
to the Judeans, or
Yeah,
you know.
and when I noticed that whenever Isaac has a run-in with Abimelech, his own Abimelech, that
Yeah, exactly.
there's that thing, that there's the explanation that you just gave, but after that they kind of footnote that with, but this is probably his progeny. This is probably like a
Oh, I
part of
must have
his
missed
lineage as
that.
well. Yeah, like this is probably Abimelech too. But even then, there's an Abimelech in someone's family line. There's a kid named Abimelech, like further down, like in among the nations of Israel. There's an Abimelech.
Hmm.
So yeah, but yeah, I think in that case it's a titular Abimelech rather than a
Well, uh,
nomenclature.
maybe I'm wrong, but I seem to remember thinking that he was a king, one
Hmm.
of the North Kingdom, I think.
Hmm. Okay,
Maybe I'm wrong, but it might have been that was his name, like a chosen name,
gotcha.
kingly name. I don't
Okay,
know.
that would make sense. But yeah, like I said, it's probably a titular name.
Hmm. So
Uh
anyway,
yeah.
so this whole thing with Sarah and the Abimelech and all this stuff, and God comes to Abimelech in a dream and says, "You're as good as dead because you have taken this man's wife. Now, why didn't, you know, Pharaoh get promised with death?
Mm-hmm.
Because Abimelech hadn't even slept with her.
Right.
And God's like, oh, yeah, I did that on purpose. I made it so
Mm-hmm.
that you couldn't sleep with her. And
Mm-hmm.
then also cursed all of his wives and concubines so they could not conceive
Yep.
during this time, even though he
Mm-hmm.
hadn't slept with her, and he's going to be killed for it. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I
Yeah.
feel
No.
like I'm being an asshole, and I'm trying not to be an
No,
asshole.
no. I mean, it's perfectly worth. It's a thing to be curious about. Like it just what's the point? Like, what are we trying to learn from this? What is there to be? What is there to glean from this? Because like these are words. This was written in a holy book, so like there's something to be taken from this. If it's
Mm-hmm.
not literal, then there's a message. What's the message? And it's that Abraham and Sarah are so untouchable that even the mere thought of having them be a part of your harem or of your servants is like
Mm-hmm.
worthy of like he's going to kill them. And Abimelech, understandably, I mean, he could just say, "Get out of my." It was a dream, but he still recognized God in his dream, and he's still willing to, as soon as he's willing to understand that and to apply it to the situation and say, "Hey, Abraham, what the crap are you doing? Like, what is this?" And he's like, "Get the heck out of here." You know what I mean? He demands of God. He's like, "Are you serious?" He basically asked God the same question I personally asked God, which is like, "Are you really like? I haven't done anything wrong. You're gonna punish me?" You know, that I ask that of God a lot, or I ask if there is a God that that's the
Mm-hmm.
case. Like I try to be a good person, and yet here are these things that are acting on your behalf. They're here because you told them to be,
Yeah,
and then you're going to punish me for it,
but also, you know, if you're going to drive home the point by repeating the story
right?
under different circumstances,
Uh huh.
why is the circumstances different? Why are the
Mm-hmm.
punishments different? You know,
Yeah.
why are the punishments more severe when less has happened?
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah. And then he threatens Abimelech. He
Mhm.
says that if you don't return her, then you will die. And he's like, "Well, of course, I already told you I'm going to return her.
Right,
Like,
right, right.
like, what do you mean?" And God's like, "Right, right, sorry, I
And
wasn't."
not only that, he tells his men, if anybody touches her, you're going to face retribution. You
Yep,
know,
yep,
which goes back to the polytheism we were talking about in the area. How generally, you know, you've got your God, that's fine. I'm not going to mess with him. He's still powerful. He's just not the one that's blessing me. So
mm-hmm.
he recognizes this God. You know, he's like, okay, fine. We'll let you go. Your God's got your back. I'll make sure that, you know, you're not molested.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's like a cultural thing where like whenever so we learn here in a sec that, or as we read that Abimelech, he offers them not only offers but bestows upon them slaves, uh, animals,
Mm-hmm.
what else? Money and land. He gives them land. He's like, "Look, I'm not trying to mess with no gods." He's like, I didn't ask for this, and yet you brought this to
And
my
this is after
doorstep."
Abraham tricked him.
Right, exactly. They tricked him. Sarah didn't. She wasn't a part of. She didn't even give up the ghost on that. Right. She didn't give up the
Yeah,
ruse. She wasn't
nobody
like.
touched her.
Exactly.
And then,
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
no one touched her, and then she was is just as guilty as Abraham in this scenario. They both could have at any point said like, "This isn't the right thing to do." She didn't.
Mm-hmm.
It took God's intervention to do it, and that's when Abimelech was like, scooted on out the door, said, "No harm, no foul." Even though if there were to have been harm and foul, it would have been on you. I'm still going to take the brunt of what could have been and give you all of these things: money,
Mm-hmm.
people, animals, and land. Just go over there and leave me alone.
I also had a thought that I wonder if the reason this was inserted um, was to prove that Isaac belonged to Abraham.
Uh-huh.
Because during this time, if, you know, if she had been taken by Abimelech or one of his men and then they conceive,
Uh-huh.
you know, I don't know.
Yeah, that's
Maybe I'm
interesting.
reading too much into it, but
Yeah, like you said, there's almost like a conception switch that was flipped.
mm,
God's like, nope, you can't conceive. And then it wasn't until Abraham, I mean, the least he could do. But even then, why would it take Abraham praying? If he hadn't prayed for Abimelech's people to have been able to conceive again, would God would have been like, well, whatever you say, you're the prophet, or you're my servant. You're the righteous man. You know, you're telling me God would just be willing to like let this entire line of people just just die off because of something
Well,
they didn't do.
they gotta show that he was a righteous man. You
Yeah,
know,
he was a good dude.
he's a good. I know he lied to you and he tricked you, and you almost got because of it, but he's a good man.
Father
He's a good old
Abraham,
boy.
many sons. Yeah, he gets a song. Abimelech just never. Oh, he prayed because had he not, then Isaac couldn't have learned the same lesson later. Because Isaac and Revka, whatever, pull the same crap on Abimelech the second,
Yeah.
right? Isn't that right?
Well, I don't know if one's necessarily causal to the other, but yeah, I mean the point stands.
Yeah, yeah. But there has to be a reason why Abimelech was allowed to continue his lineage. And it has to be pertinent to this story because everything kind of just folds back in. It kind of just, there's nothing happening outside of this. There's this one lineage, and then there's like literally the rest of the world that's just going on like, yeah, whatever. Like, whatever you say, like there's a God, sure. I have many gods,
Yeah, and there's no mention of, hey, these cities just got destroyed. What happened?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What's all that smoke over there? Like, don't worry. Right, so we're finally getting to the part where the covenant is being fulfilled. Sarah gets pregnant, right? Like Sarah gets pregnant. They name him Isaac because God told him to. After 8 days, he's circumcised. Abraham's 100. So at this point, Sarah is able to return all of the ill will that Hagar had given her because now she's conceived.
Well, I would say she's already returned it by mistreating her in the first place. Remember?
Yeah, but she was told to go back. So
yeah.
Like, yeah. Yeah, so
yeah,
let's see.
Matter of fact, God sent her back, and now, Sarah's like, I want her gone. Get rid of the slave. Get her out of my face. Yep. Get her out of my face.
Let's see. Yeah, she says exactly that. Get rid of that slave woman and her son. She doesn't say my son or your son. She's talking to Abraham, and she says, get rid of her son. And Abraham just hung his head. He's like, oh, geez. He doesn't.
God says to him, don't be distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned.
Yeah, exactly. So just another case of the second born being the fulfillment of the lineage, the blessing, the receivers of the blessing. Yeah. So yeah, she goes on. Hagar is cast out. This is where she goes to. What does she do? She goes to the desert. She can't make it. And she realizes that she and her 14-year-old son aren't going to make it, right? So she basically hides him behind a bush, or she hides behind a bush to cry, right?
Because
she put the boy.
She put the boy a ways away because she didn't want to hear him cry.
A bow shot away, which is significant because he's a bow hunter or whatever. So
yeah,
and also,
I mean, at this point, how? Okay, so I guess at this point he's coming up on 14.
Yep.
So it's not like he couldn't follow her.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Bow shot away. Yeah. Exactly. I don't get it. It's almost like he's a 14-month-old child, and he's like put him under a bush.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. So yeah. So then there's the. That's interesting. A rainbow is significant because it's the sign of the covenant with Noah that nothing will be destroyed. So I wonder if the bow is being brought up here in order to just kind of remind you that God's not going to let something bad happen here. She says,
I don't know. I mean, it could be, but again, I think that might be reading a little too much into it. I think just a bow shot might have just been a common measurement that people could understand without being, 14 and a half cubits or whatever. People would have been familiar with it.
Okay.
Through warfare, for hunting, whatever.
Right. Yeah, but it's also somewhat significant because there are other measures of distance, and they use bow shot because, and as we learn later, that Isaac or Ishmael is skilled with the bow. So they mention that on purpose. Maybe,
which is odd too, because what's his name? Esau, also hunter.
Yeah, that's true. And Esau, what happens with Esau?
Esau is the firstborn that has his blessing supplanted. Like in this case,
he becomes an Edomite. They become the Edomites, and I can't remember where. I was trying to think of where their land was, but I can't remember the map off the top of my head. Yeah. So anyway, God intervenes and says, "Don't worry about it. I'm going to make sure that I already told you once. Geez, I already told you that he's going to be fine." And yeah, he lived in the desert and became an archer. So there you go, the desert of Paran. And his mother got a wife from him from Egypt. Wow, that's pretty nice. Didn't have to go on plenty of fish or whatever it is. All right.
And then Abimelech comes back and chases him down and is like, whoa, we need to make a treaty. We need to make sure, your God's with you. Mm-hmm. You don't come after me, I won't come after you.
Exactly. Like he has every reason to fear Abraham. He's only tricked him. And there's no way Abimelech didn't already know of Abram's previous his exploits as Abram, pulling the same crap. He knows that he has the power of God who can intervene in his own dreams. And so he has every reason to be fearful.
Wife's womb too.
And his whole people, all the people were barren because of it. Yeah. Yeah. So he's like, he has every reason to be scared of Abraham. Mm-hmm. So they come up with
So there is that. They come up with this plan for peace between them or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it says after the treaty had been made at Beersheba, which I believe is also one of those places that was named because of the thing that happened there. We made a treaty here, and therefore we called it the place we made the treaty.
The treaty place.
Yeah. After that, it says Abimelech and Philcol, the commander of his forces, returned to the land of the Philistines. They're clearly not in the land of the Philistines. And then Abraham planted his a tree there and called on the name of the Lord, and he stayed there in the land of the Philistines for a long time. So was he in the land of the Philistines or not?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Let's see. So Beersheba, isn't that so? Could Beersheba not be in the land of the land of the Philistines?
Well, according to let me read it straight from the word itself. After the treaty had been made at Beersheba, Abimelech and Philcol, the commander of his forces, returned to the land of the Philistines. So they were at Beersheba, and then they went back to the land of the Philistines. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and there he called upon the name of the Lord. Which, why a tree and not an altar like before? I don't know. But he called upon the name of the Lord, the eternal God. And I think the wording might be different there as well. And Abraham stayed in the land of the Philistines for a long time. So I guess it's possible he planted the tree and then worshiped the Lord. And then went and then left or whatever, but it doesn't say that. So
that's all it says, though. It doesn't say, and Abraham stayed in that place that was the land of the Philistines. It just says that he went and stayed in the land of the Philistines. Yeah, and it wouldn't be bad if they kind of helped us understand a little bit more of what happened there. I mean, how that came to be. Yeah, that's completely plausible that there's a little bit of confusion there. Like, why not just make it easier to understand? Yeah, it says here that Beersheba means the well of seven and the well of the oath. So there's the seven again. Yeah, and then, of course, everything has... You don't build a well without first having God, without first having a deal with God. Okay, and then that's it. We're done with Abimelech. We have said, okay, we're all of that uncomfortableness behind us. Let's move on to another story from Genesis. Yeah, exactly. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham, here I am." Have you come across that phrase?
Not afraid yet. I think that's the first time. I think Adam might have said it in the Garden of Eden. Maybe.
So they actually all say it. They all are called upon by God. And when God's called upon by them, they all say, "Here I am, here I am." And the Hebrew word, is Hanani. Have you heard Hanani before?
I have not.
Yeah. So it's interesting because it's essentially, you're not just saying over here. When you say Hanani, it's almost a declaration of, not only am I here, you have my undivided attention. Like when you say, "Where are you?" and you say, and the response is Hanani, it's like, okay, you're submitting everything to me. You're willing to give me your undivided attention, and you're ready to receive instruction.
Reporting as ordered.
Exactly. Precisely. Yeah. So I find that interesting. Like you'll see a lot of occurrences of "here I am," and most of the time,
it was very familiar, but I hadn't noticed it.
Yeah. And yeah, so God's gonna ask a pretty significant favor from Abraham, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does he do?
Supposed to take his son, his only son that he has left,
Yeah,
and sacrifice him.
yeah, yeah.
So,
God wants to
and
test him.
well, but I don't know. I guess we know that
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't, so he's just going to go sacrifice his son.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me like if you believed in God so much, and you were so certain, 100% positive that God told you to sacrifice your son, and it's good and just to do this,
Mm-hmm.
why would you lie to your slaves that you're taking with you on this trip?
Mm-hmm.
Because it says, he said to his servants, stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you. If you're sure that this is the right thing to do,
Mm-hmm.
and you're walking hand in hand with God, you're not afraid this time when he talks to you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why do you lie about that?
Yep. Yep. And like, what do you do? Do we know how old Isaac is here? I don't think we do we?
I don't think we do.
Huh. That's
It just
interesting.
says sometime later.
Yeah. So yeah, and so we also don't know why. I mean, why wouldn't Abraham also just be completely honest with Isaac? Like, we still have to be duplicitous. We still have to create some ruse, even though this is the orders from God Almighty, and we still have to like come up with some like fatuous thing.
I mentioned it before, but I think it bears repeating. It says, take your son, your only son.
Uh,
Your only son that
uh,
he's got two sons. One of them he sent him away, but
yeah. Well, that's something, speaking of repeating, that happens again later. I don't know if they use the same terminology specifically, but they do make reference to whenever Ishmael is referring to Joseph. I'm not Ishmael. Israel is referring to Joseph. He'll refer to him as my son, basically he'll refer to him in a way that is meant to insinuate that he's his one son.
I see what you're saying, because that stood out to me as well.
Mm-hmm.
What he says is, he's my son, the only one I have left, even though he's got,
exactly.
10 others standing in front of him or whatever.
Exactly.
But if you read it, he had two sons by that one woman, and this is the only one of those he has left.
Right. But still, I mean, to use that phrase.
I mean, yes, it is absolutely a shitty thing to say.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily the same thing, but let's keep that in mind as we move forward, because I think there are other instances of because there's all this when we get into Jacob and Esau, I'm sure, I mean, Isaac is going to have a tough time reckoning with how to bestow those blessings as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so so they continue on their journey. Like they trick everyone. He's lying to his boy. He's like, "Where are we going?" He's like, going to the old baseball game or whatever." He's like, So they're collecting all this stuff,
and Isaac had to be old enough to understand, because he did say, where's the goat for the sacrifice of the ram, or whatever it was.
Good point.
Where's the lamb for the burnt offering? And Abraham lies again. Of course, you have to lie to your son at that moment, but he says God will provide the lamb. Mm-hmm. And then he does. So that's more prophecy.
Yeah. Well, then what does he provide?
Saw a ram. So it was a ram. Yeah.
Well, no, he says a lamb.
He says a lamb.
He provides a ram.
Abraham looked up, and there in the thicket, he saw a ram caught by his horns.
What do we make of that? A lamb can be interpreted as like an innocent, some produce of your flock. But a ram's a wild animal. It's interesting to me.
No,
it's interesting
not necessarily.
Well, not necessarily.
Lambs are usually, even if you're just talking, amongst the flock, the lambs are the young ones, and then the rams are the older males.
Okay, well, there you go. That's interesting. Well, in that case, he's told that he's going to be provided a lamb, which we could assume could kind of stand in the place of Isaac, and then he's provided with a ram. So I wonder, in that case, what are they trying to symbolize with that sacrifice, with the sacrifice that God actually provides?
I don't know.
Am I reading too much into it?
I think we might be, but there's times when reading into things is, I think, required. But I'm thinking, if I remember correctly, this is one of the things that I was told back in the day, that in case people didn't know, I was a Christian twice, after I got married, I converted back and then lost my faith again. So this is coming when I was older, and I can remember more of this stuff specifically. But I think this was supposed to be an allegory for Jesus, retconning.
Yep. Well, it can be interpreted that way, for sure.
Specifically because of the substitutional sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus became the sacrifice for everything,
Mm-hmm.
just like this ram was the substitute for Isaac.
Gotcha.
So I don't buy it necessarily, but I do think in reading into it in terms of Isaac being the lamb of the slaughter,
Mm-hmm.
there's some things like that.
That's how it reads to me. That's the thing that I find interesting. But yeah, for God to sort of promise a lamb, but allow a ram.
The problem with reading into things like that is that we're looking at it from modern eyes. So it's you gotta, even when you're reading into something and you think you're right, you gotta take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, and we also have to find a way to make it make sense. If this is going to be something that people,
it doesn't. Yeah. It really doesn't.
All right, so let's see. So God's very happy that Abraham was willing to sacrifice Isaac. He didn't know, he wasn't sure about this guy, even though he's God. All he's done is bless him and bestow riches upon him, and castigate others for not recognizing his greatness without any sort of instruction.
And God swears on himself at
Where,
this point.
Where does it say that? What does he say?
From 15 to 18, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
The angel of the Lord called Abraham from the heaven a second time and said, I swear by myself, says the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, yet again, I will surely bless you and make your descendants numerous as the stars of the sky. We've talked about that before as well.
Yep. That's very interesting how they all get that same message.
Mm-hmm. And you notice there are no traditional marriages yet. We still have not seen the one man, one woman situation.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I also like, earlier we didn't touch on it, but I had it written down at some point where the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, like he had to call him out twice. He's like, hey, and it was like, yes.
Get off your phone.
But then of course Abraham responds, Hanani, are you sure that you're willing to receive instruction? Because I had to say your name twice. Like, yeah. Anyway, I thought that was pretty funny. Yeah. So Abraham returned to his servants. They set out together for Beersheba, and Abraham this time stayed in Beersheba. That's enough with the Philistines. I've had it. So,
unless Beersheba was still part of the land of the Philistines, I'm still not sure of that.
Yeah, that's true.
I'll have to check my atlas. I haven't cracked it open yet.
And then we get some more of Nahor's sons. They just tack this on. Here's some more of Abraham's nephews. That's what we need.
Unless they somehow wanted to give the lineage of Rebecca, I don't understand the point. I really don't. And even then,
that's true, Rebecca. Yes.
Even if that's the reason it's in there, I still don't understand why. What is the reason?
Yeah, I mean,
I think the culture back then was kind of obsessed with lineage, which makes sense if you're a wandering group. Being able to call back to people that other people would know, it would be a benefit. But I don't know.
Well, I feel like if we're gonna use this book as a the word of God, or like whatever, divinely inspired, then like you kind of want to have receipts, and to have Rebecca's lineage mentioned there. That's a good point. I forgot that Isaac and Rebecca are cousins. Yeah. So you got to have it in there. You got to let them know, like, and that continues all the way through. Like there's entire books written in the Bible. I mean, what is it? Is it Numbers that goes into like, all right, here's some lineages, and there are chapters in Genesis where you're like, all right, sit down, because I got to mention all these names to you before we get to some good story.
Yeah, and this next one is similar. Chapter 23, it's kind of similar. It's not a genealogy or anything, but it's just one of those things where you don't know exactly why it's in there. Why? Okay, so Sarah died, got to bury her. This is where she's buried. That's fine. I get maybe why you would want to do that, but why include the arguing about no? Let me pay you, please. No, please. It's on me. It's my land, but you can have it. Bury your people. It's fine. Yeah. No, seriously, just tell me how much it's worth. I will pay you.
Yep.
No, please. It's a gift. No, please.
Well, I can tell you. So the little bit of reading into that I did, I found that interesting as well. In this culture, apparently, there's when it comes to gift giving, there if someone gives you a gift and you felt it necessary to repay the gift, and a lot of times you did, you want it to be as even as possible. Like
Right.
there's a $25 limit for white Christmas this or white elephant this year, that type of thing. But if in the event of an overpay, you might still be willing, you still might graciously say, oh, okay, thank you for overpaying. But you're like, you still have an intrinsic feeling like now I owe them a favor. So
Right.
what Abraham's trying to do here is he's trying to lay claim to this land.
You don't
Thank
want
you
to
for
be
the
in great
gift.
pocket.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You don't want to have to, feel like you owe somebody something, especially if this land that you're bestowing upon me is going to be important for the next 500 years or more. Like I'm going to be buried here. My wife's going to be buried here. The stone to that cave entrance is going to be very important to me. So I want to make sure that there's not going to be any other issues come up about this land. So that's kind of what I read into it as well.
Yeah. And I think this is one of those places that stands to this day as well. I could be mistaken about that, but okay.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I mean, again, I think it's because like this is a place you can go and visit, and they want to make sure that that according to the Bible, there's no one lays claim to this except for the people who own it. And if we say we own it, and there's proof, I got the receipts, so to speak. So
yeah, I guess.
Yeah, that's what they said in the Jewish podcast I listened to, the Bama podcast. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, and that's pretty much all that happens here, right? Sarah dies, and then they literally give them the deed to the land. Yeah. And I guess that's
it.
Pretty much the best place to leave it off for this episode. Chapter 23, we made it. We did it. And that's perfect because that means the beginning of the next episode, we're going to be starting with Isaac and Rebecca, and just basically continuing the lineage. We're going to do Abraham, then we're going to do Isaac, and then we'll finish it up with episode 4 and Joseph. So, any other notes from this section for episode 2?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
We definitely want to, mention the reading for next time. If anyone is wanting to follow along, I'm pulling it up because I don't have it off the top of my head. 24 to 36, Genesis 24 to 36 is what we'll be reading and discussing. Well, we've already read it, but we'll be discussing it. If you want,
just like last time, if you want to let us know where we've messed up in our reading or interpretation, or what your interpretation might be, we're very open to that. Just like I said last time, don't be a jerk. Let us know. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, thanks for having this discussion with us. And until next time, I'm Jeff.
I'm Chris.
And this has been Eating the Apple. Alrighty.